Welcome back, dudes and dudettes, to League Unlocked. My name's Eric. Thanks for joining us. And there have been a lot of surprises in the LEC so far. Obviously, G2 completely blitzing, dominating, destroying the competition. Probably didn't expect that to actually happen. But of course, the biggest surprise is Fnatic starting out 5-7. They were 3-7 and legitimately on the edge of missing playoffs, which is something we have never said about Fnatic in their history. They have been, over the entire legacy of the EULCS, they have been the most dominant franchise in Europe by far, with 7 LCS titles to their name, dating way back to the very first splits in 2013. They won spring and summer, and obviously there have been countless different iterations of rosters for Fnatic, starting with that Expeke era, then the perfect 18-0 summer dream with Yellow Star and the boys when Huni and Reignover came over, and then last year with Reckless and Caps when they won back-to-back split titles. This team has never missed playoffs, and they've only finished below third place in a split one time. So obviously there is an absolutely incredible legacy that they're held to, and there's a massive expectations that this team is held to. So if they didn't make playoffs, it would be absolutely insane. Luckily for them and for their fans, they did look a whole lot better in week 6, but now still 2 games below 500, and there's only 6 games left in the LEC regular season. And we know that there is a serious log jam from basically 3 to 8 in the standings right now. So it's going to be an absolute mess for Fnatic to get out of that. But luckily for them, the positive signs are there. All their star players definitely stepped up in week 6 and looked miles better than they have for the majority of the 2019 split. Some of the main things we've criticized them for, obviously Brox's early game completely disappeared and he was MIA. Not the case in week 6. A couple of Nocturne games, he looked completely back to the World Championship form that we're accustomed to. Reckless and Hilla saying, we thought these guys have a full year playing together. They should be dominating the majority of the bottom lanes in the LEC. That's exactly what they did here in week 6. And Nemesis, the big question mark on this squad, a couple of Zoe games, and finally you saw a little bit of the mad lion in him pop out, and he was finally much more aggressive in lane, and Broxa was actually helping him out much like he did in the glory days with Caps in that mid lane. And Bwipo, he's, talked about his frustrations. He doesn't want to play tanks. Well, he'll do it for the better of the team, but he would prefer not to. But we did see him on some tanks here in week 6, but we know he prefers playing the Jace and getting game-winning flanks. So Fnatic do have some wins against some of the best teams in Europe. We saw the Splice win, and they took down Vitality and Origin, which were almost top 2 really in our power rankings within the last couple of weeks. So Fnatic, if there's a team not to lose faith in, even with a new member on it, it is them, even when you saw it's a 32% chance for them to make playoffs, and the way they're getting that number is they're assuming that every single game is going to be a toss-up 50-50, which, as we get to their schedule a little bit later, they're not going to be 50-50 toss-ups. There'll be favorites in a lot of these matchups and some serious underdogs in a couple as well. So they're not going to be 50-50 toss-ups, but boy, they waited till the last minute to finally show some signs of life here, because if they did not go even 2-0, even if they're sitting at 4-8 coming into this final couple of weeks in the LEC, you'd be hard-pressed to make a case for them to make playoffs. But now with just a couple of games back, I've got faith that these guys will definitely turn it around. There's still too much talent on this roster. We really haven't seen Nemesis actually live up to the hype that he had coming into. And no, we're still not expecting this guy to be Caps, but we are expecting the Fnatic to at least play around him a little bit. We've heard Reckless talk about him being one of the quietest members on the squad, and obviously that's expected when you're coming in to a team that has 4 players that just went to the World Championship Finals. There's no way you're going to really be calling them out or telling them how to play the game when they just had such an incredible run in 2018. So he's going to be playing backseat or passenger to this squad, but really they should be putting more emphasis, more resources into him. I hope Fnatic doesn't just completely divert back to the Reckless carry camp and have him one 2v8 with Hylissang in that bottom lane. That's one way they can win, but you need multiple ways if you actually want to make some noise in the playoffs. But first, they actually have to get there, so how are they going to be able to do it? They got 6 games left, and the remaining schedule isn't the toughest. I mean, here's how it's going to work. The last couple of splits in the EULCS, in spring, a couple of 8 and 10 teams made the playoffs. In summer, you had to finish 9 and 9. I think that's the magic number, which means Fnatic probably has to go 4 and 2 over the final 6 games here, and that actually looks pretty manageable. I mean, you look at Excel and Rogue, immediately that should be 2 wins for Fnatic. I think they should be big favorites against Splice. They've shown that they can already take them down. So that's 3 wins. Then you just need a win against Schalke or Misfits, because I assume that G2 is probably going to be a loss, even if they play as well as they did last week. And I think they're more than capable of getting a win against Schalke or Misfits, maybe even both of them. And another thing to keep in mind is that tiebreakers are definitely going to have huge implications as the playoff race winds down in Europe. They're 0-2, really 0-3 against SK, so you don't want to finish tied with them. They've already got a win against Splice. They have a loss against Schalke and Misfits, so you really need to win one of those games to tie that head-to-head up at 1-1, because if you fall 0-2 against maybe Misfits or Schalke as well as SK, there's a very good chance we're looking at some 3-way ties here for the playoff seedings, from maybe even 3 to 6, anyone outside of the top 2. So some of those early season losses may come back to bite Fnatic and put a damper on their playoff runs. But right now, 4-2 should be more than achievable for them, especially when they have Rogue and Excel on the schedule for them. If they lose and get upset in one of those, then that really hurts their chances. But even though it still looks like it'll be tough, I think Fnatic should still be able to pull off playoffs. And even if they come in as that 6th seed, you still don't want to match up against them. That's going to be a scary matchup for them. And something we haven't even talked about is the different LEC format, with there being a kind of mini losers bracket. But when it comes to best of 5s, we know what Fnatic's capable of, even without Caps in that lineup. And you know, if they do end up making playoffs, it'll be because they were playing well to close out the split, and they'll be riding that momentum, and they will have completely forgotten about the struggles that they had early on in the split. So have some faith for you Fnatic fans. 4-2 is the magic number for them to close out the split, and I think they are more than capable of it, and I would be scared to match up against them when the playoffs roll around.